Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday. My name is Kevin Smith, and thank you for joining me today for Monday Matters. Today I'd like to talk about culture. It's a behavior that defines how people interact with one another within the organization, how they interact with customers and suppliers, and other stakeholders within and outside of the organization. It is the behavior that exists both when leadership is present and when they've left the individuals within the organization to operate on their own. I want to share a simple concept that I think can take you a long way, and that is this: culture happens. Whether you want it to or not, whether it's happening faster or slower than you'd prefer, culture happens. And if we're not intentional about it, it tends to take on a life of its own, whether good or bad. But companies with great culture are intentional about it. In other words, it's not an accident. They work very hard to develop and maintain the culture that pays dividends for them. So this Monday, I want to leave you with 3 tips that can help you become more intentional about the culture that you want to create. Number 1, we have to define the culture that we want. Within our organizations, we have a lot of different people with different backgrounds and different worldviews. To expect them to all come together and automatically adopt the culture that leadership is looking for is unrealistic. We do have to define the principles around which we want our culture to operate. Number 2, we have to acknowledge and reward and reinforce the behaviors that we see within the organization that support the culture that we want. And number 3, we have to reject behavior that is contrary to the culture that we're trying to create. Remember, if we ignore behavior that is contrary to the culture that we're looking for, we are inherently supporting the current culture. My friend, one thing that is important to remember: developing a culture, the desired culture, is not an event. It's not a task. It's not a project. It's not something that the organization simply does. It's the way that an organization is. If you want to be intentional about developing your culture, it takes time and persistence. But with proper leadership and proper focus, things can start to happen sooner than you may think. So on this Monday, I challenge you. For this coming up week, I want you to look at the behavior within your company and ask yourself if that's supporting the culture that you're looking for. And if it's not, make a list of things that you can do differently to support the culture that you're trying to achieve. So, thank you for joining me, and thank you for making the decision to make this Monday matter. See you next week.